We're offering your husband full immunity from prosecution in return for any testimony that he might give us.
Carmela was never going to end up in Adriana's situation to begin with. She understood her role, the boundaries, and the unspoken rules of being a mob wife in a way Ade never could.
I want to marry you.
What?
I mean it, Adriana. I love you.
Chrissy failed Adriana in a lot of ways. Not marrying her sooner, never teaching her how to deal with cops or the feds, basically leaving her defenseless.
I have an appointment with a lawyer, Tony. I will get a restraining order.
Carmela, on the other hand, would have known exactly what to do. Keep her mouth shut, call the attorney, and let the system churn around her until she was safely back home making baked ziti. And honestly, the feds wouldn't have gotten much out of her anyway. Tony and Carmela lived on a long-standing don't ask, don't tell policy, and she stuck to it. Even if they tried turning her into an informant, she'd be practically useless. Tony would immediately clock that something was off the second his wife of decades suddenly started fishing for details on mob business. That said, she wasn't perfect.
Dice.
You already took your cut from the bird feeder, and don't fucking deny it again!
The show even pokes a hole in her otherwise varsity-level mob wife instincts with that stunt at the bank. Making deposits just under the reporting limit. Structuring is literally a federal crime. So not only did she swipe money from the Birdhouse Fund, she accidentally turned the whole thing into a federal liability for Tony. Smart woman, terrible amateur banker. But if, in some alternate universe, Carmela did flip, yeah, Tony would kill her. As terrified as he was of prison, Carmela ratting would be the ultimate betrayal. Worse than any business beef, worse than any affair. Whether it was a crime of passion or something more deliberate, Tony wouldn't let that slide. The only possible exception, if he could trade her betrayal for some galaxy brain deal that let him burn New York, the Russians, and half the crooked politicians in Jersey, and walk away clean. Short of that, Carmela's gone. Because for all Tony's flaws, his kids are the one line he never crosses. Carmela was safe as long as she stayed Carmela, the perfectly calibrated mob wife who knew everything, asked nothing, and handled herself exactly the way the life required.
So when do we get to roll with Tony? What? What, are you tripping?
Honestly, I still can't decide whether Matt Bevilacqua and Sean Gismonti were meant to be a pair of disastrously incompetent mobsters or a disastrously incompetent couple.
Rich, this is Matthew Bevilacqua and Sean Gismonti.
They're hilarious, but let's be real. Even Christopher Moltisanti, not exactly the family's resident genius, had more sense than the two of them combined. And while Furio Junta was probably exaggerating, he wasn't completely off base in noticing how cozy those two were.
This, us, look at us. We're like two fucking scared rabbits or something.
I mean, it's not typical friendship behavior to sit around together in your underwear, smoking weed, watching whatever questionable video choices they were making. As a kid, media totally convinced me that adulthood meant lounging around with roommates, half-dressed all the time. Spoiler, that almost never happens. Maybe it's because, back then, having adult roommates in the US was coded as being a loser or queer. So maybe hanging out in your underwear was part of that whole vibe. These days, when none of us can afford to live alone anyway, the symbolism has kind of evaporated. And honestly, if we're talking brain power, Chris might have been smarter than Matt, Sean, Jackie Aprile Jr., and Brendan Fallone combined. Not a high bar, but still. We never got to see it, thanks to the show's time jumps. But I wouldn't be shocked if young Artie Bucco and Tony Soprano had their own brand of borderline homoerotic teenage nonsense. What? You're telling me you've never wondered about that?
So what about this fucking Jews 250 on Mahaffey's 100?
How illegal were Hesh's activities, really? I mean, yes, the guy was a loan shark and spent plenty of time rubbing elbows with the Tony Soprano crew. But he always carried himself like this sweet, old music industry gentleman.
Shit, look at Hesh. George Gershwin.
He was a whore master.
A George Gershwin-looking whoremaster with a taste for fine, dark-skinned women, horses.
When he passed, your dad, I called Hesh. He sent me $500.
And tossing cash around like he was doing community outreach. So what's the verdict?
Really limiting your exposure to potential Rico boop.
Was Hesh one bad Rico sweep away from cooking grilled cheese on a radiator? Or was he just operating in that murky Sopranos gray zone, where the worst he'd face is a slap on the wrist, and maybe a stern lecture from his accountant? Because let's be real, Hesh wasn't just helping his friends.
Stewed enough to say it over the phone. Let's hear it.
Loan sharking is an illegal business, and with it comes the usual extracurriculars: intimidation, money laundering, and the occasional suggestion to remove a guy's anatomy as a motivational tool.
Or he pays Hesh the 250 grand he owes.
He flat out says Tony was the guy he'd send after people who didn't pay, and Tony Soprano is not, by any legal definition, a reputable debt collection agency. Honestly, Hesh had it made. He made his first fortune ripping off black artists back in the day.
Your own father was a silent partner in Ethno Records,
greasing palms and sending Johnny Boy Soprano around to get his artists airplay. Then he parlayed that money into loan sharking, using Tony and his crew as built-in muscle and protection, all while enjoying tax breaks, cushy arrangements, and a general immunity bubble. And despite all that, he still tried to pull a fast one on Tony with the racetrack situation.
Your dad owned a racetrack.
Who ever heard of a Jewish guy riding horses anyway? I love how in season 6,
Christopher, hi, it's Carmela. Is Adriana there?
Carmela is basically hounding Adriana's killer for updates on finding her. Like, ma'am, you are interrogating the dude who literally did it, and he's just sitting there eating a bowl of ice cream. Easily one of the funniest subplots in the whole show. What makes it even better is how Tony tiptoes around the topic.
Did you ever say anything about Ralph or the Bevilacqua kid?
No.
Would you remember?
I swear on my life.
He's dropped hints to Carm about all kinds of murders and crimes he and the guys have committed, but Adriana's death is the one thing he cannot even let slip as a rumor. She was too close, too personal, and he knows the backlash would be nuclear.
Have you heard from Aid lately?
No. Why would I hear from her?
Carm obviously has her suspicions. She knows in her gut something is off. But as long as it's never said out loud, she can keep pretending everything is normal and grant herself that moral absolution she's always reaching for. Carm is all cope, blinded by the lifestyle, knowing the truth deep down, but choosing the version that hurts less. And honestly, she's still an amazing mother through all of it. And yeah, technically Silvio is the one who killed Adriana. Tony just gave the order. Funny how that phrasing suddenly makes it hit harder. No wonder Tony gets so irritated whenever Carmela starts asking questions. It's dark, it's messy, and it's absolutely hilarious to watch him squirm.
Now, who told you I had anything to do with the death of your father, but their information is faulty?
I've never bought that the cop Chrissy whacks after his retirement party was actually the guy who killed Dickie. The episode deliberately muddies the water. Tony's body language in the car, the cop's frantic denial. There's just not enough solid evidence pointing either way. I'm not saying the cop was definitely innocent, but the story isn't exactly overflowing with proof either.
Detective, lieutenant in the Clifton Police Force. Retired today. That's his retirement party.
The theory I keep coming back to, and one I see a lot, is that Tony knew this wasn't Dickie's killer. Instead, the cop was probably someone who'd been on the Soprano payroll years ago, someone who'd outlived his usefulness now that he was retired. Tony tells Chrissy this is Dickie's murderer not because it's true, but because it binds Chris to him emotionally. And around this same time, Tony tells Melfi, I am in the process of bonding him to me inseparably.
The cop shot my father. I know what you're telling me. I'll never forget that.
Mission accomplished. Later, Chris tells Tony, I'll never forget that thing you did for me. Plus, knowing what Dickie meant to Tony, there's no way Tony would have let the real murderer just stroll into retirement. Tony's nostalgic, impulsive, and capable of volcanic rage. If he knew who killed Dickie, that guy wouldn't be enjoying a sheet cake and a gold watch.
I'm sorry.
Then there's the cop's last moment. He screams, I'm sorry, right before Chris shoots him. That makes me think he was guilty of something, just maybe not the thing Tony claimed.
I say we force feed him his sombrero.
And of course, someone chimes in with, the one with the sombrero? Which, honestly, is still funny. Anyway, I never thought the cop was the actual killer, but the show gives you no definitive confirmation either way. I always assumed he was some unrelated loose end Tony needed cleaned up, and framing it as justice for Dickie was just a convenient way to weaponize Chris's emotions. If we're dragging the Many Saints of Newark into this, then yeah, the movie pretty explicitly suggests the cop wasn't the real killer. Although technically, the filmmakers could retcon anything they want, so who knows. And yes, I know, the movie says it was Uncle Junior who ordered Dickie's murder because he was mocked for falling down the stairs. But just to be clear, Junior wasn't the trigger man. He ordered the hit, someone else carried it out. The guy literally gets a phone call telling him it's done. He wouldn't need that call if he'd personally pulled the trigger. Capiche? And that's the last time I'm having this conversation. Probably. I don't think Carmela set out to use Dr. Robert Wegler, at least not in the cold, calculating way he accuses her of. There's clearly genuine attraction there, real affection even, and none of that feels tainted by ulterior motives. She didn't sleep with him because AJ was floundering.
After our meeting the other day, I had some ideas about some further strategies for Anthony.
But the conflict of interest is baked into her worldview. She lives in a universe where relationships and favors operate on a kind of unspoken barter system, and that's as normal to her as breathing. That's what makes the whole dynamic so compelling.
So, is this what they call common ground?
Carmela honestly likes the man. She's perfectly willing to give it up, as she puts it, purely because she's into him. But once she realizes he has the power to help AJ, it flips a switch. Not a manipulative one, just one she's been conditioned to use. Oh, great, you can do something? Wonderful. Help.
How could asking someone you're with for help be using them? That's what people do.
It's not even an ask, so much as a natural continuation of intimacy. In her world, this is how people take care of each other, how affection and obligation blur. And yes, she comes on strong about it. But again, that's the language she knows. She communicates through pressure, insistence, emotional heat, because in her environment, that's how things get resolved. Wegler, meanwhile, is operating from a totally different moral ecosystem, one where boundaries are crisp and motivations are supposed to be clean. So when he calls her out, he's not wrong, but he's also missing the larger truth. Carmela isn't scheming. She's a product of her upbringing, her culture, her universe of corrupt hierarchies and transactional survival tactics. She's not being duplicitous, she's being Carmela.
I think you're a user, Carmela.
What?
Which is why I always felt bad for her in that scene. Wegler hits her with this sharp accusation. That's why you slept with me. And she's blindsided because, in her mind, the relationship was genuine, and the favor was just part of that genuineness. He sees exploitation, she sees intimacy. And yes, she absolutely brings with her a kind of inherited mode of conflict resolution. This half-conscious sense that authority is always compromised, that favors are how you survive, that you hustle not because you're immoral, but because that's the water you swim in. She even says it herself. She could have slept with the guy who owns the pharmacy chain, but she didn't. Then she storms upstairs, which is peak Carmela, indignant, self-justifying, and deeply unaware of how much she's revealing.
How dare you talk to me that way?
So no, she didn't only sleep with Wegler to get something out of him. But did she sleep with him and then instinctively fold him into the machinery of her life? Absolutely. It's not manipulation, it's muscle memory. Something's always puzzled me on rewatches. Why didn't Adriana ever seriously question the disappearance of her uncle Richie? Richie April gets killed at the end of season 2, and yet it never seems to register as a mystery to her. Other characters at least poke around. Janice flat out asks Tony, what happened to Sal Bonpensiero? But with Adriana, nothing. No curiosity, no follow-up, not even a raised eyebrow. The thing is, she barely knew Richie to begin with. He'd been in the can for a decade, so it's not like they had a deep uncle-niece bond to draw on. And Adriana, well, she's not exactly the brightest bulb on the tree.
And your Uncle Richie, I suppose he's in the program too?
He is.
When the FBI first talks to her in season 4, she earnestly tells them her Uncle Richie is in witness protection, at which point they basically go, absolutely not. She's genuinely surprised. It's almost sweet, in a tragic, how are you surviving adulthood kind of way.
Your uncle was a rat.
No fucking way.
Shut up.
Between her naivety and her capacity for denial, she was primed to buy whatever explanation Christopher fed her. If he said Richie went into witness protection, she'd believe it 100%.
The more you can tell us, the more we can help you and Christopher.
No follow-up questions, no deeper suspicions, just acceptance and a new outfit. And honestly,
Richie? He vanished into the witness protection program.
the whole witness protection cover story is shaky even within the show. How believable is it that Richie suddenly flipped after doing a 10-year bid? Jackie Jr. falls for it because he's a total idiot, but even Jr. buys it, and he was still sharp and technically running things at that point. It's one of those Sopranos logic gaps where the character's willingness to believe a dumb lie says more about them than the lie itself.
Well, what about Richie? He must be devastated.
Richie's gone.
So in the end, it's not that Adriana chose not to pull the thread. She never even noticed there was a thread.
Finn saw him giving some guy a blowjob.
On rewatch, it's kind of wild how casually Meadow pushes Finn to tell everyone about Vito. By that point, she had to know what that kind of information means in her world. Even if she was still clinging to the fantasy that her dad is just a gruff suburban dad with a quirky job, she grew up around enough of these guys to understand that someone was going to make Vito's life a living hell. And honestly, who sits their parents down and relays secondhand gossip like that unless they know exactly what they're doing? And the irony is, if Meadow had actually stayed on that med school track, she might have realized that Vito's blood pressure meds could have been messing with his head. There's even a tiny sliver of truth in his excuses. Abilify, the schizophrenia/bipolar med, has infamously turned a portion of patients into compulsive gamblers. So who knows? Maybe some guys took it and ended up sucking a few dicks along the way. Stranger side effects exist.
You're like your mother, but you're all me.
My favorite Meadow moment is still drunk, emotional Tony slurring, "I tell everyone you're just like your mother, but really, you're all me. Nothing gets by you." And she's just like, "Dad, you're drunk," before drifting to the fridge, the light hitting her face like some kind of revelation. And she delivers that perfect line, "Sometimes we're all hypocrites." That's the real Meadow, the one she keeps buried under pre-law moralizing. You see flashes of it throughout the series.
Our dads are in the garbage business. But you think they control every slime ball and illegal gun in like 100 communities?
The "my dad doesn't control every illegal gun" line about the weapon that killed Jackie Jr., the same guy who cheated on her.
When America opened the floodgates and let all us Italians in.
And the moment she smugly reframes defending minorities to mean Italians. And that's early on, like season 2. It's been there since the Davy Scatino fiasco, when she instantly pivoted to defending her dad the moment things got uncomfortable. Rewatch the whole show assuming Meadow is a low-key manipulative sociopath, and suddenly every fake tantrum, every subject change, every moral stance she retreats from, it all snaps into place.
You gotta hear what Meadow just told us.
Mom!
The cat's out of the bag, Meadow.
At least her maneuvering gave us one of the greatest scenes ever. Finn shakily describing what he saw at the construction site to a room full of murderous gangsters. And then there's the hilarious cultural anthropology nonsense they feed him. Old country conflict resolution traditions, poverty of the Mezzogiorno, and Finn sitting there like, "You people expect me to buy this?" When they say John Gotti, he counters with Rudy Giuliani, back when Rudy still had all his marbles. And then, anyway, $4 a pound. But the Meadow/Finn/Vito situation,
I mean, what do you think's gonna happen to Vito for being gay?
really highlights how women reinforce social norms in these insular groups. None of the women necessarily think Vito deserves to die, but they still treat it as a scandal that must be addressed. Gossip becomes a crude form of social regulation. Witch hunts, lynchings, neighborhood violence, they all historically start with someone whispering something everyone ought to know. And I honestly believe Meadow, as a millennial raised in a comfortable suburban bubble, couldn't even grasp that Vito might be killed for being gay. That possibility is just too far outside her lived experience. She knows the mob only as the warm, joking uncles at her dad's dinner table. She didn't see Silvio execute a sobbing woman. She didn't see Tony garrote a guy. She didn't see Ralph beat a pregnant woman to death. So it's easy for her to buy into this sanitized, ethnological idea of the mob as some charming Southern Italian cultural artifact. The brutal reality simply doesn't exist in her emotional vocabulary. That's Meadow's whole arc. 1 foot in modern America, 1 foot in an old world code she doesn't entirely understand, but instinctively enforces anyway. She felt that Vito violated something in her tribe, even if her rational mind never connected that gut feeling to the bullet waiting for him down the line. If you enjoy deep rewatches that strip the mythology down to the bones, hit subscribe. No nostalgia goggles, no moral shortcuts. Just the show as it actually is.